We are at Waterbury Music and Sound in the northeast side of Minneapolis, in the basement of Reid Kruger's house.
I remember going to see Toussaint with G8 years before I joined the band, and I just remember the energy from the whole group, the horn section, the rhythm section, the tunes that they had written, and the music could stand alone by itself, and then with Toussaint on top, I've always just liked the way that he develops a story throughout his writing and his music. And so we'd work together, and so it wouldn't be like meeting somebody new. It was somebody who I knew what they do, I knew what they were about, and so I just kind of approached him about doing this with me, and I didn't even know what it was going to be at the time. I knew I had this body of work. I knew that I would love to have him on it, and it kind of started out at a place where if this only ends up being played in my living room to myself, I just want to hear him with my music, my compositions with Toussaint's writing, for my own personal satisfaction.
I grew up in New Orleans, and then I moved to Minneapolis when my parents split, and so from there I grew up in south side of Minneapolis and Riverside Plaza. It was kind of a split. Riverside Plaza is this huge kind of project building in south side of Minneapolis for a lot of East African immigrants, and that's where I stayed for daycare because my mom was a nurse at the hospital and she was just getting her master's, so I was there a lot. I was there more than I was at the south side of Minneapolis, but I first came into hip-hop when it had to be around like just the Compton era, like just the gangster era of rap with Eazy-E and Dr. Dre, Ice Cube. And I particularly took to Ice Cube more than anybody else, so my first heard Real Motherfucking G's, that was really on the box. That was my first engagement with it.
I first met Reid Kruger through one of my old professors when I was in school, and he had recorded some marimba literature with him, and we were looking to do a jazz album with a group of mine called Snowblind, and we were looking for an engineer who we could get a good referral, somebody who wasn't too expensive because we didn't have a lot of money, somebody who we could work with and be flexible. And so the five of us came to meet Reid and recorded our first album with him, recorded our second album with him, and he and I kind of hit it off right away, kind of like long lost twin brothers, both named Reid, same initials, same name, and then we started to just do more and more work together. He had recorded G8, and so G8 was actually working on a second album at the time, right before we decided to part ways with that group. And so he had been involved with that. We'd actually started working on the third Snowblind album a little bit as well. So we had been collaborating in a lot of different capacities, and it made sense to approach him for my own project because he's very good at what he does, very easy to work with, and I found and continue to find him to be a friend first and a business partner second. Somebody who is not only an engineer, but is open to contributing musical ideas to the project, to somebody who I can say, hey, what should we do here? And 10 times out of 10, he comes up with an answer that seems to fit, and it's something that takes a song to the next level. He's got a musical mind, which is great. He's a musician. He's not just a button pusher, but he's somebody who writes, he's somebody who sings, he's somebody who plays multiple instruments. And so it's been a great fit for me. Somebody who allows me to make some of my own mistakes in the studio and knows when to, shut up and just let me hear something how I want it, realize whether it's right or wrong, and he's very, very open to that. Very patient with me. He puts up with me, puts up with my demands, puts up with all the expectations that I have.
All right, we'll go for it.
And somebody who I've learned a lot from in terms of how to deal with music, how to deal with other people, how to deal with certain scenarios and situations. And he's been just a great sounding board for me to bounce ideas off of.
We began, basically Reid would come in with the charts. He'd work it out on the piano at home. So we'd come in, we would set up a piano, patch and record it just to get the shell of the tune. One thing I find working with Reid is, it's not as simple as blocking chords. He actually comes in with parts and plays it as if it is going to be the final product. That initial signal, which I think was really helpful because it focuses us right from the get-go.
Where'd you find some of the ideas and content for that specific material?
I mean, shit, when we started, man, there was like issues with significant others and my family and stuff as an artist, because I was traveling the country with this live hip hop band, and our short bus would break down, money was horrible, love is lost, and there's no respect anymore, and so it's hard. You have this passion for music, and then on the flip, you have absolutely no credibility in society or the country or this country, like, to your name, like you have nothing, or you are worth nothing. And so coming to terms with a lot of important people in my life that were like, hey, you need to figure out how this is going to fit into your life, or you need to get a fucking day job. And so for me, writing about that, like the dichotomy of being at grips with the business aspect of it and the creative aspect of it, that had a lot to do with it. And there was a lot of people that dropped out of my life that were, didn't have a lot of confidence in it, and, had kind of lost respect. And a lot of it was about parting ways with that and really owning up to, being a creative mind, whether I'm on, the corner of 5th and Franklin, banging on top of a pot with, please, we'll work for food, or we'll rap for food. But it was about a lot of that. So
Start halfway into talking, but then you still hear a little bit of singing. Like the first couple parts. That's what I was saying. No, because you sang after you started talking.
Yeah, so you said you want to stay during the talk.
I think the nature of this project has evolved quite a bit. Reid first called me and said that he was interested in writing some hip-hop tunes. Prior to that, he was mainly composing jazz music and performing as a jazz drummer. And, he said he really wanted to give that a shot. And I said, I think that's great. And he had recorded some material and was talking about, hoping that it would, hopefully get signed or take off. And, I had initially just suggested to him when I heard that, why not pulling some people from, outside areas of the country to diversify the crowds and the listeners that this music could be potentially marketed to.
As a creative process, what I first do is I'll have a tune in my head, and then I'll have an idea of like the tone that it should have, and then I'll just start humming it. And then at that point, I want to put words to it, and then it kind of happens from there. But I don't know, it's more so it's picking a subject and then rolling from there and just sitting down, fleshing it out, kind of going mad with it for a little bit. Really just kind of like sitting at a coffee shop without a day job and like just staring at a piece of paper, and then it happens. You can't just force shit like that. Sometimes you have to wait for it, and then it'll kind of write itself at a certain point. But it's the creative process is a lot of patience and coffee. Patience and coffee.
Like I said, we started with sort of building up the human side. And I think the most interesting thing is, how do we pair this human component with the technology? And how do you do it tastefully? It's one thing to say, here's a really beautiful band tune, and then all of a sudden you throw an analog synthesizer at it. Well, it needs to be just right, or it's not going to work, and don't bother. And sometimes we came across that where it just didn't make sense. We try some little technical maneuver and try and be clever, and in fact we try a handful of them, and then the sixth one, you'd hit and you'd be happy and you'd take it, and it would actually expand the tune a lot. So.
Yeah, no, and taper that. That's the comeback. Hey, Reid, can you save that first half of the chorus that he did? And just keep it up.
The thing that he just did, you're saying?
Because the groove in the pocket in that sounds very meticulous. It's like if that could even somehow be worked into what he had initially recorded.
Just for
I think the
reference.
second half of the
It'll be way different.
it'll be well.
performance.
Yeah, I mean that what you just laid down the first half is
There's an enthusiasm there that's
It's really
just
good.
on fire.
Well, we've come a long way. You know, from the very infant stages, I was still leaning towards a jazz album with lyrics over the top, with rhyme over the top. As this project has evolved, it's turned into a hip-hop project with a jazz influence. And I've had to become more comfortable with the fact that we need to add additional sounds. We need to produce the tracks. We need to be open to, I need to be open to flying in different samples and using different sound effects in order to be on par with what's happening in modern hip-hop today, which is where I'd love to see this end up. But at the same time, it's different because we're using real instruments, we're using advanced chord changes, we're differentiating between verses and choruses and bridges based on specific harmonies. And I think as we move forward, I don't want to lose the original intent, but I want to supplement it with things and continue to use technology to our advantage, continue to keep an ear open to what's happening with modern hip-hop, incorporating some of those elements, but not turning this into an overly produced piece of music. I still want it to be human. I still want it to have that human element. But I've had to bend from where I started.
you know, a phenomenal flautist, Katis Buckingham from Los Angeles, who did the flute solo to Anchorman, is now a part of the project. Jazz saxophonist Walter Smith, Taylor XT, piano prodigy, and many others have now been a part of this project. Listening to today's popular artists, Drake, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, Kanye West, and pulling concepts from their music and utilizing it in this music, I think has been a huge process of the music's evolution.
I think the biggest challenge for me is when you have this much talent on one project, it's all flowing through my fingertips at some level, and I need to make sure that I'm getting the best levels I can, setting microphones the best way I possibly can, not to mention when we have artistic decisions to make. You know, what soundscape am I going to put in there, and how are we going to treat it, and are we going to give it motion, or is it going to be static? You know, what are we doing with the mix? And I'll tell you, when you ship out these references of Drake or Jay-Z or whatever, it's very humbling. It always is, you know. And so it's really, you know, what do we do? How do we get it onto the same record, if you will?
I would like to see this project go on a national tour and then international to Europe and just wow everybody. You know, to get a really good campaign for it. To really put Reid's name out there, my name out there, Andrew's name out there, and Reid's name out there. To really represent everybody to the fullest. As an artist, it's hard to put a price tag on what you are worth, and that's the hardest thing in the world because a lot of things in this game are priceless, and so putting a number on it is hard. And I think everybody has been paying dues for a long time, and I would love to see this project basically give credit where it's due, and that's the people that have worked with it. If I offend anybody, please step out right now. We can have words.